Human beings on this planet are far from being homogeneous. There are many variances involving intellectual attributes, tendencies towards certain behavior, preferences, personalities, abilities, physiological characteristics, inherited traits. Certain aspects can be considered generally favorable and preferred, some aspects generally unfavorable. Other aspects are generally considered to be favorable or unfavorable depending on location, society, religious beliefs, ideological beliefs, customs, bias, circumstances, opinions, convenience. It is not always clear which traits are predominantly beneficial to societies and individuals. Some individuals are proud of having traits that are preferred and admired. Others can feel dismayed having traits that are perceived as being undesirable. Although the assessment of some traits depend on individual perceptions, and some traits can have both positive and negative relevance and can include some generalizations. Also, it can be noted that sometimes people have good reasons to be proud of certain attributes. Sometimes people try to make the best out of certain realities to avoid an otherwise negative situation. It's normal to have both traits considered to be ideal, as well as traits considered to be undesirable. Often people possessing traits deemed to be undesirable excel in other ways, rather than be diminished by others' perceptions. Whatever the case in the natural order of human existence, people can be gifted, flawed, or just different in some ways. Additionally, being gifted can be perceived as being flawed, and being flawed can be perceived as being gifted. Under what circumstances are people defined as being homosexual? What are the characteristics attributed to homosexuality? How does this relate in the natural evolvement of the human species? What are some of the most prominent effects on society? Which traits and types of behavior are considered beneficial and which are considered to have a negative impact? It is simply a natural variety among humans or human abnormalities. A philosophical discussion can go either way. All recurring human traits can be considered as normal when taken into higher contexts. For example, the birth of human conjoined twins is a rare phenomenon, but has continually occurred and will continue to occur. Therefore, although rare, this can be considered as a normal part of the human existence. Homosexuality is dramatically more common, so under this criteria would be considered very normal and routine, and the world would be significantly different without the existence of human homosexuality. It has been estimated that only approximately 10% of humans are left-handed. Just going by the numbers, left-handedness could be considered as an abnormality. However, not in a negative way considering the attributes, contributions, and other positive effects from many left-handed people. Some of the differences are advantageous, disadvantageous, and some not that significant. People regarding homosexuality, it may be accurate to conclude it involves an imbalance. This, in that some people are not in sync with their physiology. Some have a conflicting personal gender identification perception. This includes having traits more commonly associated with members of the opposite gender. Does the nature of homosexuality include preferred attributes that should be celebrated, differences that should be taken into context, and undesirable characteristics? Significant aspects include the perception of the population considered to be homosexual, different traits that are shared uniquely among homosexuals, statistics and demographics relating to homosexuals. Putting this partly into perspective are the following two examples. Again, examples, not factual. Homosexuals would have a lot to be proud of, would receive much better treatment, and homosexuality considered much more favorable if the following were true. They were to comprise 25% of the general population. Demographically speaking, a significantly larger percentage were more successful, better educated, more talented, and overall more desirable within the general population. They were considered less likely to engage in criminal behavior, including sexual crimes, and had a higher percentage of outstanding citizens. Homosexuals would receive much less admiration, worse treatment, less respect, and looked upon less favorably if the following were true. They were to comprise just 1% of the general population. Demographically speaking, a significantly larger percentage were less successful, less educated, less talented, and overall less desirable within the general population. They were considered more likely to engage in criminal behavior, including sexual crimes, and had a lower percentage of outstanding citizens. The two examples illustrate how having more specific information could affect opinions, behavior, treatment of others, and how people view themselves. However, even then, in most public appearances, most members of the general population do not overtly demonstrate their sexuality. In most cases, a person's sexuality is neither relevant nor questioned. In some settings, overt indications of one's sexuality can often be considered abnormal. In certain situations, many people would prefer not to be made aware of someone else's sexuality. Overtly demonstrating one's sexuality in situations where one's sexuality is generally irrelevant often complicates the situation. Whether intended or not, the results can be both positive and/or negative for all involved. Whatever the case, along with others, they are entitled to their human and civil rights as individuals. But in making distinctions by classifying people or themselves as being homosexual, it would be preferable to have a better understanding of who they are. Some people don't appear to be homosexual, but are considered to be because they say they are. Is it as simple as preferences or feelings where the differences are purely psychological? Must there be certain psychological differences in order to consider someone as being truly homosexual? Must there be both specific physiological and psychological differences to determine if someone is homosexual? Are there other variances? Could the following three questions be accurately answered? What are the total effects of homosexuality on societies? Hypothetically, how would the world differ without human homosexuality? Hypothetically, how would the world differ if all humans were homosexual? Accepting the realities and putting them in their proper perspectives could be very beneficial for societies. It is in some ways absurd that when certain people declare their homosexuality, it becomes such significant news. Whether it be expressions of surprise, admiration of those coming out, hot topics of discussion, or different views as to be the repercussions, it's often over-dramatized. When relevant or preferred by the individual, people should be aware of someone's homosexuality at an appropriate time. When irrelevant, someone's homosexuality should not be a factor taken into consideration. It's a part of existence that at times matters or doesn't matter, but either way should not be blown out of proportion. It would appear that the homosexuals themselves would benefit most. Many would feel free to express themselves as they really are, being happier, less stressful, some not having to deceive others into thinking they are heterosexual, but there would be many benefits to the societies as a whole. This could avoid many marriages with undesirable outcomes, when some homosexuals unwantedly feel compelled to get married to a heterosexual. Also, when relevant, many would appreciate having certain knowledge of another's sexuality before pursuing certain relationships. However, during the course of one's routine existence in most societies, such knowledge is usually irrelevant.
Some people have intense feelings about homosexuals in general because of personal experiences, their lifestyle, relatives, friends, etc., religious and other beliefs, encounters with people they believe to be homosexual, beliefs and opinions expressed by others. Obviously, many people have been mistreated because of their actual or perceived homosexuality without any other justifying or compelling reasons. Many compare this to the civil rights movement. There are some similarities, but at the same time, many differences. One difference being that hostility against African Americans has been much more widespread, generalized, and more intense. Even the unborn have been victimized. One unfortunate similarity is the practice of unjustly vilifying people by falsely accusing them of being against the human or civil rights of others. Too often people have been unjustly referred to as being racist, as now more and more people are being unjustly referred to as being homophobic. Even some behavior classified as hate crimes may not be racist or homophobic as claimed. Very important though, the accurate meaning of these words. Often people are labeled with such derogatory terms simply because they do not coincide with the best interest of others. Often people expect others to have an open mind and respect their perspective, but themselves are not open to decent. To be fair, there should be an honest attempt to gain understandings of some different perspectives, putting things in a proper context. Would the following be considered homophobia? Most heterosexual men would consider engaging in some type of intimate activity with another man to be repulsive. sickening, revolting, degrading, unnatural, and or humiliating. Accordingly, having some type of intimate encounter, then discovering the other person is actually a male and not a female would infuriate many. Some men would react violently, including assaulting or killing the male that deceived them, or even committing suicide. If the man that was deceived, assaulted, or killed the transvestite or transgender male that deceived him, it could widely be considered a hate crime. The person assaulted or killed could be considered a victim of an evil homophobic. That could include a lot of recognition and publicity, and be memorialized as a victim of hate, intolerance, and injustice. It would appear to be accurate and justifiable to use the term in situations where someone has a good opinion of another based on others' attributes, then, after discovering the person is a homosexual, disregarding all the positive attributes, and forming a negative opinion solely based on discovering the person is homosexual. The aspect of homosexuality in one's personal life is considered more important than the other attributes: character, intelligence, behavior, personality, treatment of others, etc. Wanting to deny, deprive people of certain human or civil rights without just cause, based solely on their quality of being homosexual. Mistreatment, punishing, and being unfair to the people solely because of their homosexuality. There are constantly campaigns, dialogues, discussions, rules, regulations, etc. to educate and or persuasion to influence people's perception of homosexuals. Often the message is that not accepting homosexuals, as heterosexuals are accepted, is immoral, unjust, and cannot be tolerated. The results vary, and the 5 groups below are included in the outcome. A. Some people are convinced that they were wrong, feel pleased to be enlightened, and drastically change their opinions. Some enthusiastically embrace their new perspective, feel guilty about previous feelings, and may even work to promote their newfound view of homosexuals. B. Some conclude that their perspective was partially inaccurate, that trends in favor of homosexuals are inevitable and justifiable, and they somewhat change their perspective. C. Some come away with a better understanding of some issues, but don't basically change their perspective. However, many feel compelled to keep their real opinions private. Some are fearful of retaliation or being considered homophobic. They feel powerless to express their true feelings and maybe wrongly state that they are in agreement with the pro-homosexual views. Some feel that they have been manipulated and are forced to accept certain views and have no recourse. In certain surveys, they can be included among those supporting gay rights. D. Some that do not change their perceptions and resent certain trends in favor of homosexuals do not hide their feelings. Sometimes they suffer the consequences. Some feel secure as part of groups that share their views. E. Some feel compelled to take more severe measures, especially if they feel bullied and are backed into a corner. They refuse to be submissive and be forced to accept something they are against. Their reactions can include inflicting violence against certain people and or joining extremist groups. Some are determined to fight for their perceived rights at all costs.